The suitcase hit the marble floor of our foyer with a thud that echoed through 15 years of marriage. Marta stood there in her designer yoga pants and oversized sunglasses, looking like she was headed to Cabo rather than another girls' weekend in Minneapolis. At 43, she still had that marketing executive polish that had first caught my attention at a hospital fundraiser. Sharp, confident, always 3 steps ahead of everyone else in the room. "Just a quick getaway with the girls," she said, not quite meeting my eyes as she adjusted the Louis Vuitton bag I'd bought her for our anniversary. "You know how Lisa gets when she's stressed about her divorce. We need some girl time." I nodded from the kitchen doorway, coffee mug in hand, playing the part of the understanding husband. Owen Jacobs, 44, maintenance supervisor at Hennepin County Medical Center, married to a woman who made twice his salary and reminded him of it in 1,000 subtle ways. The kind of guy who fixed broken things for a living while his own life slowly fell apart. "Where to this time?" I asked, keeping my tone casual. Over the past 6 months, these trips had become as regular as my Tuesday night bowling league. "Oh, just that little spa place up in Duluth. You wouldn't like it, all cucumber water and meditation music." She laughed, but it sounded rehearsed. Everything about Marta sounded rehearsed lately. I'd learned not to ask too many questions. The supportive husband routine had served me well for years. Trust was supposed to be the foundation of marriage, right? That's what all the counseling books said, anyway. The ones Marta had bought after our rough patch 3 years ago, when I'd worked too many double shifts and she'd complained about feeling neglected. "Have fun," I said, meaning it. Or at least, I had meant it the first few times. She wheeled her suitcase toward the garage, heels clicking against the hardwood floors we'd installed together during our ambitious home renovation phase. Back when we still did things together. Back when we meant something more than 2 people sharing a mortgage and a Netflix account. "I'll call you tonight," she said over her shoulder. "Don't wait up." The garage door rumbled closed, and I was alone in our 4-bedroom colonial in Edina, surrounded by the kind of suburban perfection that looked great in real estate photos but felt hollow when you actually lived in it. Granite countertops, stainless steel appliances, a wine fridge that Marta had insisted we needed, even though I drank beer and she preferred vodka. Everything carefully curated to project success. I should have gone back to my coffee and the morning news, should have enjoyed the quiet weekend, maybe caught up on some projects around the house. Instead, I found myself standing in our bedroom, looking at the space where her suitcase had been. Something nagged at me, a feeling I couldn't quite name. That's when I noticed her phone charger still plugged into the wall. Marta never forgot her charger, never. She was the type of person who had backup chargers in her car, her office, and her purse. Her phone was practically surgically attached to her hand during work hours. But there it was, the white cord coiled neatly on her nightstand. I picked it up, turning it over in my hands like it might reveal some secret. Maybe she'd grabbed a different one. Maybe she'd finally bought one of those portable battery packs she was always talking about. Maybe I was being paranoid. But paranoia, I was learning, sometimes wore the mask of intuition. The house felt different with her gone. Not peaceful, empty, like a stage set after the actors had left. I wandered through rooms that suddenly seemed too big, too clean, too perfectly arranged. When had we stopped living in our house and started just existing in it? My phone buzzed, a text from my buddy Mike. "Bowling tonight? Jenny's working late and I need to get out of the house before I start talking to the dog." I typed back, "Marta's gone for the weekend. I'm in." Mike had been my best friend since high school, back when we both thought we'd conquer the world with nothing but determination and bad attitudes. He'd ended up as a plumber, I'd ended up in hospital maintenance, and we'd both married women who were smarter than us. The difference was, Jenny actually seemed to like Mike. "Pick you up at 7, he replied. "And bring cash. I'm feeling lucky." The day stretched ahead of me like an empty highway. I could have done a dozen things. Clean the gutters, organize the garage, finally fix that loose board on the deck. Instead, I found myself in Marta's home office, ostensibly looking for a phone number, but really just looking. Her desk was as organized as everything else in her life. Color-coded files, labeled folders, a calendar with appointments written in her precise handwriting, marketing meetings, client dinners, conference calls, the busy life of a successful professional. But there, in the corner of her desk calendar, I saw something that made me pause. Small pencil marks, barely visible, on certain weekends over the past 6 months. Just tiny dots, like she was tracking something she didn't want to write down. I counted them. 7 dots, 7 weekends, 7 girls' trips. That seemed like a lot, even for someone as social as Marta used to be. But then again, what did I know? I worked with pipes and electrical systems and broken air conditioning units. I fixed things that had clear problems and obvious solutions. Marriage, apparently, was more complicated. My phone rang, jarring me out of my thoughts. Unknown number. Hello? Owen, this is Lisa. Lisa Chen, Marta's friend since college, or former friend, depending on who you asked. They'd had some kind of falling out a few months ago, something about Lisa's messy divorce and conflicting loyalties. Marta had been vague about the details. Lisa, hey, what's up? I was wondering, is Marta around? I tried calling her, but it went straight to voicemail. She's on one of her girls' weekends. Up in Duluth, I think. Silence. Long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. Lisa. Girls' weekend? Her voice sounded strange. Owen, I haven't talked to Marta in 3 months, and I definitely wasn't invited to any girls' weekend. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I sat down heavily in Marta's ergonomic desk chair, the one she'd special ordered because it was supposed to be good for her back. Maybe it was a different group, I said weakly. What other group? Owen, Marta, and I were best friends for 20 years. I know all her friends. After our fight, most of them stopped talking to her too. Something about her being... Well, it doesn't matter now. But it did matter. It mattered a lot. What were you fighting about? I asked. Another long pause. Owen, I think you and I need to talk, but not over the phone. Can you meet me somewhere? We agreed on a coffee shop in downtown Minneapolis, neutral territory. I spent the drive there trying to come up with innocent explanations for why my wife would lie about who she was spending her weekends with. Maybe she was embarrassed about making new friends. Maybe she was taking some kind of class or workshop and didn't want me to know. Maybe she was planning a surprise for our anniversary. Maybe I was an idiot. Lisa was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth with her hands wrapped around a large coffee like she was trying to warm herself from the inside out. She looked older than the last time I'd seen her, tired in a way that went deeper than just lack of sleep. Thanks for coming, she said as I slid into the seat across from her. What's this about, Lisa? She studied my face for a moment, like she was trying to decide how much truth I could handle. Owen, when Marta and I stopped being friends, it wasn't because of my divorce. It was because I found out she was sleeping with my divorce attorney. The coffee shop noise faded to a dull buzz. I felt like I was underwater, everything muffled and distant. That's not possible. His name is Ryan Foster. He's not actually an attorney. He's a real estate agent. But he was helping me with some property stuff during the divorce, and Marta met him at one of my dinner parties. They started, whatever you want to call it. I found out by accident when I saw them together at a restaurant downtown. When I confronted her, she didn't even deny it. Ryan Foster. The name hit me like a physical blow. I'd heard that name before, floating around the edges of Marta's conversations. A colleague's friend, someone from her networking group. A name that appeared just often enough to seem normal, but never often enough to seem important. How long? I managed to ask. I don't know exactly. At least 6 months, probably longer. Oh, and I'm sorry. I should have told you sooner, but I kept hoping she'd end it. And then we had our fight, and I didn't know how to... 6 months. The timeline clicked into place. 6 months of girls' weekends. 6 months of late nights at the office. 6 months of feeling like a stranger in my own marriage. There's more, Lisa said quietly. Ryan's married too. His wife doesn't know, as far as I can tell. And Owen, I think they've been using these fake girls' trips as cover. Marta would tell you she was with me and the other girls, but we were never invited. We didn't even know about them until now. I sat there, trying to process the information. My wife of 15 years was having an affair. Not just any affair, but one elaborate enough to require fake alibis and fictional friends. One that had cost her real friendships and was about to cost her a lot more. What are you going to do? Lisa asked. That was the question, wasn't it? What do you do when you discover that the person you trust most in the world has been systematically lying to you for months? When you realize that every I love you and see you tonight and just a girls' weekend has been part of an elaborate deception? I don't know, I said. But even as I said it, something was crystallizing in my mind. A plan. A way to turn Marta's own deception against her. I thanked Lisa and drove home in a daze. The house felt different now. Not empty, but contaminated. Every room held memories that I now had to question. Had she been thinking about him when she kissed me goodbye? Had she been comparing us? Had any of it been real? But I didn't break down. I didn't scream or punch walls or call her phone a dozen times demanding answers. Instead, I did what I did best. I analyzed the problem and started working on a solution. Marta's mistake wasn't just having an affair, it was underestimating me. She saw a simple maintenance guy who fixed broken things and didn't ask complicated questions. She didn't see someone who understood systems, who knew how to trace problems back to their source, who could be very creative when it came to repairs. Or revenge. I spent the rest of the day researching Ryan Foster. Social media made it easy. Real estate agent, just like Lisa had said. Married to a woman named Jennifer. 2 kids, lived in a McMansion in Plymouth. His Facebook was full of professional photos and motivational quotes about success and determination. He looked like exactly the kind of guy Marta would find attractive. Polished, ambitious, everything I wasn't. By evening, I had a plan. Mike picked me up for bowling as promised, but I was distracted, going through the motions of friendship while my mind raced through possibilities. "You okay?" he asked after I'd thrown 3 gutter balls in a row. "You look like someone ran over your dog." "Just tired," I said. "Work stuff." But Mike had known me too long to buy that. After the game, he cornered me in the parking lot. "Spill it, Owen. What's going on?" So I told him. All of it. The fake trips, the affair, Lisa's revelation. Mike listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each detail. "That lying bitch," he said finally. "Owen, I'm sorry. What can I do?" "Nothing yet, but I might need your help with something later. Whatever you need, man. Whatever you need." I drove home to my empty house and sat in the dark living room, thinking. Marta would call soon, probably around 9 o'clock like she always did on these trips. She'd tell me about the spa treatments and the girl talk and how much she missed me. She'd lie with the same ease she'd been lying for months. But this time, I'd be ready for her. The call came at 9:17 p.m., just like clockwork. I let it ring 3 times before answering, long enough to sound like I'd been busy, but not long enough to seem suspicious. "Hey, babe." Marta's voice was bright and cheerful, with that slightly forced quality she got when she was trying too hard. "How's your evening going?" "Good," I said, settling back into my recliner. "Just watching the game. How's Duluth?" "Oh, you know how it is. The girls are already tipsy, and we haven't even had dinner yet. Lisa's being dramatic about her ex again." Lisa, who hadn't spoken to her in 3 months, who wasn't in Duluth or anywhere else with my wife. "That's too bad," I said evenly. "Tell her I said hi." "I will. Listen, I might not be able to call tomorrow night. We're planning this whole spa day thing, and you know how those places are about phones?" "Sure, no problem. Have fun." "Love you," she said, and for just a moment, her voice softened into something that might have been genuine. "Love you, too." After she hung up, I sat in the dark for a long time, listening to the house settle around me. 15 years of marriage, and I'd never been a suspicious husband. I'd trusted her completely, maybe stupidly. But trust, once broken, leaves sharp edges that cut both ways. I spent Sunday planning. By Monday morning, I knew exactly what I was going to do. The first step was reconnaissance. I called in sick to work, something I almost never did, and drove to Ryan Foster's real estate office in Minnetonka. It was one of those glass and chrome buildings that looked expensive and soulless, the kind of place where people in suits moved other people's money around and called it productivity. I parked across the street and waited. At 11:30, Ryan emerged from the building with a woman I recognized from his Facebook photos as his wife, Jennifer. They were holding hands and laughing about something, looking like the perfect suburban couple. She was pretty in a soccer mom way, with highlighted blonde hair and the kind of athletic build that came from regular Pilates classes. They didn't look like people whose marriage was falling apart. They looked happy. That was about to change. I followed them at a distance as they walked to a nearby restaurant, some trendy place with exposed brick and artisanal everything. Through the window, I watched them share appetizers and lean across the table to whisper to each other. Ryan checked his phone twice during lunch, both times with a secretive smile that made my stomach turn. Was he texting my wife, planning their next rendezvous, laughing about how easy it was to fool the dumb maintenance guy? After lunch, Jennifer kissed Ryan goodbye and drove off in a white BMW SUV. Ryan went back to his office, and I went home to prepare phase 2 of my plan. That evening, I called Marta's office. Her assistant, a young woman named Sarah, who'd always been friendly to me, answered on the second ring. "Hi, Sarah. It's Owen, Marta's husband. Is she still there?" "Oh, hi, Owen. No, she left early today. Said she had a client dinner downtown. Should I have her call you when she gets back?" Client dinner, on a Monday night, when she was supposed to be recovering from her girls' weekend in Duluth. "No, that's okay. I'll catch her at home later." But I already knew she wouldn't be coming home. Not until late, anyway. Not until she was done with whatever she was really doing. I drove downtown and started checking restaurants. It didn't take long to find them. They were at a wine bar in the North Loop, sitting in a corner booth like they owned the place. Marta had changed out of her work clothes into a black dress I'd never seen before, something that showed more skin than she usually revealed in public. Ryan was leaning close, his hand resting on her thigh under the table. I took pictures, lots of them. My phone camera wasn't great in low light, but it was good enough to capture what I needed: evidence, documentation, proof of what my marriage had really become. They left the wine bar around 9 and walked to a nearby hotel, the Marquette, one of those boutique places that charge $300 a night for the privilege of sleeping on Egyptian cotton sheets. I watched them disappear into the elevator, and I felt something inside me break and harden at the same time. Marta came home at 11:30, slipping into bed beside me like nothing had happened. She smelled like expensive wine and unfamiliar cologne, but she kissed my forehead and whispered, "Good night," like she had 1,000 times before. I lay awake until dawn, staring at the ceiling and planning my next move. Tuesday morning, Marta was back to her normal routine. Coffee, shower, makeup applied with the precision of a surgeon. She was humming while she got dressed, some song I didn't recognize. She seemed lighter somehow, happier than she'd been in months. "Good weekend?" I asked from the bathroom doorway. Exactly what I needed. Sometimes you just have to get away, you know? I know. She kissed me goodbye, a quick peck that felt more like obligation than affection, and headed off to work. I waited until her car was out of sight, then made a phone call. "Ryan Foster Real Estate, this is Ashley." "Hi, I'd like to schedule a showing. I'm looking for a house in the Plymouth area, something in the 400 HMU 500K range." "Certainly. Let me check Ryan's schedule. How about Thursday afternoon?" "Perfect." Phase 3 was in motion. I spent Tuesday and Wednesday doing research. I learned everything I could about Ryan Foster's business, his clients, his reputation. I studied his website, his marketing materials, his social media presence. I wanted to understand exactly what kind of man my wife had chosen over me. What I found was depressingly predictable. Ryan was successful, but not exceptional, charming, but not particularly intelligent, ambitious, but not especially principled. He was the kind of man who looked good in a suit and knew how to say the right things at the right times. The kind of man who probably cheated on his taxes and his wife with equal casualness. Thursday afternoon, I drove to the address Ashley had given me, a colonial in Plymouth that was almost identical to my own house. Ryan was already there, setting up his laptop and arranging brochures on the kitchen counter. He looked exactly like his photos. Tall, lean, with the kind of artificially white teeth that came from expensive dental work. "You must be Owen," he said, extending his hand with a practiced smile. "Ryan Foster. Thanks for coming out." I shook his hand and looked him in the eye. He had no idea who I was. To him, I was just another potential client, another commission check walking through the door. "Nice place," I said, looking around the empty house. "Tell me about the neighborhood." For the next hour, Ryan gave me his full sales pitch. He was good at his job, I had to admit. Smooth, confident, knowledgeable about market trends and property values. He painted a picture of suburban bliss that was almost convincing. "The schools are excellent," he said as we toured the master bedroom, "and the commute to downtown is very reasonable. Do you work in the city?" "Hospital maintenance," I said. "Hennepin County Medical Center." "Oh, that's great. Steady work, good benefits. Healthcare is always going to be in demand." He said it without condescension, but I caught the subtle dismissal. Blue-collar, working class. Not the kind of client who would buy the most expensive house or generate the biggest commission. "What about you?" I asked. "Been in real estate long." "About 8 years now. I love it. Every day is different. You meet interesting people, help families find their dream homes. It's very rewarding." "I bet it is. A lot of evening and weekend work, I imagine. Must be hard on your family." Something flickered across his face, too quick to read. "My wife understands. She knows the business." "That's good. Trust is important in a marriage." We finished the tour, and Ryan handed me his business card along with a folder full of property listings. "Think about it," he said. "This house won't last long in this market. If you're interested, I'd recommend moving quickly." "I'll discuss it with my wife," I said. "She's the one who really makes the decisions anyway." Ryan laughed. "I know how that goes. The wife is always the boss, right?" "Right." I drove home with his business card burning a hole in my pocket. The final piece of my plan was falling into place, but I needed one more element to make it work. I needed Jennifer Foster to know what kind of man she was married to. That evening, I created a fake email account and sent Jennifer a message. Nothing dramatic or accusatory, just a simple note suggesting she might want to ask her husband about his Monday night client dinners. I included one of the photos I'd taken at the wine bar, cropped to show just Ryan's face and hand on another woman's leg. Then I waited. Friday morning, my phone rang. Unknown number again, but this time I recognized the voice immediately. "This is Jennifer Foster. I think we need to talk." We met at the same coffee shop where I'd talked to Lisa, but this time the conversation was very different. Jennifer was angry. Not just hurt, but furious in a way that made her hands shake as she held her coffee cup. "How long have you known?" she asked without preamble. "A few days. You?" "I suspected something was wrong for months, but I didn't have proof until you sent that photo. Thank you for that, by the way. I needed to see it." "What are you going to do?" Jennifer's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "I'm going to destroy him. Financially, socially, professionally. By the time I'm done, he'll be lucky to sell used cars in Fargo." "And my wife?" "She's part of it too. They both made choices, Owen, and now they get to live with the consequences." We talked for 2 hours, sharing information and coordinating our approach. Jennifer was a lawyer. Corporate law, not divorce. But she understood the system well enough to know exactly how to make Ryan's life difficult. She had access to his business accounts, his client list, his professional reputation. Between the two of us, we had everything we needed to bring both of them down. But I wanted more than just financial revenge. I wanted them to feel the same humiliation and betrayal that they'd inflicted on us. I wanted them to understand what it was like to have your life systematically dismantled by someone you trusted. I wanted them to know exactly who they'd been underestimating. "There's one more thing," I told Jennifer as we prepared to leave. "I want to confront them together, make them face what they've done." "When?" "This weekend. Marta's planning another girls' trip. I think it's time I joined the party." Jennifer's smile widened. "I like the way you think, Owen. I like it a lot." Saturday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that made Minneapolis feel like the best place on earth. Marta was packing again, humming that same unfamiliar song while she folded clothes into her expensive suitcase. She'd been in an excellent mood all week, practically glowing with anticipation. "Another spa weekend?" I asked from the bedroom doorway, coffee in hand. "Actually, Lisa found this great little bed and breakfast up north. Very rustic, very romantic. I mean, relaxing." She caught herself, but not quickly enough. "You know what I mean?" "I do." She was wearing new lingerie under her clothes. I could see the lace peeking out from beneath her sweater, black and expensive looking. Not the kind of thing she wore for spa treatments with girlfriends. "I should be back Sunday evening," she said, not meeting my eyes. "Maybe we could do dinner somewhere nice? I feel like we haven't been spending enough time together lately." The irony was so thick I could taste it. "That sounds great. I'll make reservations." She kissed me goodbye, and this time I kissed her back with real feeling. Not because I loved her. That feeling had died somewhere between the wine bar photos and Ryan's handshake. But because I wanted her to remember this moment. I wanted her to remember feeling safe and loved and completely in control. Because it was the last time she ever would. I waited an hour after she left, then called Jennifer. "She's gone." "Ryan left 20 minutes ago. He told me he had a client retreat in Brainerd. Same story, different details. Are you ready for this?" "I've been ready for months." We'd spent the past 2 days planning every detail. Jennifer had hired a private investigator, a former cop named Dave who specialized in adultery cases. Dave had tracked Ryan and Marta to a resort near Mille Lacs Lake, about 2 hours north of the Twin Cities. The same place they'd been meeting for their weekend getaways, apparently. They'd gotten comfortable, sloppy, predictable. That was going to be their downfall. Jennifer and I drove up separately, arriving at the resort around noon. It was one of those places that advertised itself as a romantic getaway for couples. Private cabins, lakefront views, discretion guaranteed. The kind of place where married people went to pretend they were single. Dave met us in the parking lot, a stocky man in his 50s with the kind of face that had seen everything and wasn't surprised by any of it anymore. "They're in cabin 7, he said, handing us a folder full of photos. "Been there since yesterday evening. Haven't come out except for room service." I flipped through the photos, each one like a knife twist in my chest. Marta and Ryan walking hand in hand along the lake, kissing on the cabin's private deck, feeding each other strawberries like teenagers in love. "What's the plan?" Dave asked. Jennifer checked her watch. "They have dinner reservations at the resort restaurant at 7. We'll be waiting." The next 6 hours were the longest of my life. Jennifer and I checked into our own cabin. Separate rooms, but we needed to be on site for the plan to work. We went over every detail, every contingency, every possible way this could go wrong. At 6:45, we positioned ourselves in the restaurant. I wore a baseball cap and sunglasses, sitting at the bar where I could see the entire dining room but remain relatively inconspicuous. Jennifer took a table near the windows, dressed in a black cocktail dress that made her look like a completely different person from the suburban soccer mom I'd met at the coffee shop. At 7:15, they walked in. Marta looked stunning. She was wearing a red dress I'd never seen before, her hair styled in a way that took years off her face. She was laughing at something Ryan had said, her hand resting on his arm with casual intimacy. They looked like a couple celebrating an anniversary, not two people destroying their marriages. The hostess seated them at a corner table, intimate and private. They ordered wine. Expensive wine, judging by how long they spent discussing it with the sommelier. Ryan was playing the generous boyfriend role to the hilt. I watched them for 20 minutes, documenting everything with my phone camera. The way Marta leaned across the table to whisper in Ryan's ear. The way he traced patterns on her hand with his finger. The way they looked at each other like they were the only two people in the world. At 7:35, Jennifer stood up and walked over to their table. "Hello, darling," she said to Ryan, her voice carrying across the quiet restaurant. "Fancy meeting you here?" The color drained from Ryan's face so quickly I thought he might faint. Marta looked confused for about 2 seconds, then horrified as she realized who Jennifer must be. "Jenny," Ryan stammered, how did you find you? It wasn't that hard. You're not nearly as clever as you think you are." Jennifer pulled out the chair next to Marta and sat down uninvited. "And you must be the marketing executive. Marta, right? I've heard so much about you." Marta looked around the restaurant like she was calculating escape routes. "I think there's been some kind of mistake." "The only mistake," I said, walking over from the bar, "was thinking we were too stupid to figure it out." Marta's face went white. "Owen. Oh, God. Owen, I can explain." "Can you?" "Because I'd love to hear how you explain 6 months of lying to my face. 6 months of fake girls' trips and imaginary spa weekends and made-up dinners with friends who won't even talk to you anymore." The restaurant had gone quiet. Other diners were staring now, sensing drama, but not sure what they were witnessing. The manager was hovering nearby, clearly torn between intervening and letting the scene play out. Ryan tried to stand up, but Jennifer put her hand on his arm. "Sit down, Ryan. We're just getting started." "Look," Ryan said, his voice shaking slightly. "This is between Marta and me. You two don't need to." "Don't need to what?" I interrupted. "Don't need to care that our spouses have been lying to us for months. Don't need to be upset that you've been screwing our wives, each other's wives, in hotel rooms while we sat at home like idiots." "Owen, please," Marta whispered. "Not here. Not like this." "Why not here? You brought it here. You made it public the moment you decided to parade around like a couple? Did you think no one would notice? Did you think we'd never find out?" Jennifer reached into her purse and pulled out a manila envelope. "Ryan, these are divorce papers. I'm filing on Monday. I'm also reporting you to the Real Estate Licensing Board for using client funds to pay for your little romantic getaways. Yes, I know about the escrow account. I know about a lot of things." Ryan's face had gone from white to green. "Jenny, you can't... The business is mine too, remember? Community property, along with the house, the cars, the boat, and half of everything else you thought you owned." Jennifer's voice was calm, professional, deadly. "You'll be lucky if I leave you enough money for a studio apartment in Burnsville." Marta was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks in black streaks. "Owen, please, we can work this out. We can go to counseling, We? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "There is no we anymore, Marta. There hasn't been a we for months. There's just been you and him, and me sitting at home like an idiot, wondering why my wife doesn't love me anymore." "I do love you," she sobbed. "This doesn't mean anything. It's just what? Just sex? Just fun? Just something to do when you're bored with your boring husband and your boring life?" I leaned down so I was eye level with her. "Let me tell you what it just is, Marta. It's over. Everything. The marriage, the house, the pretending we're happy. All of it." I straightened up and looked around the restaurant. Every eye was on us. Every conversation had stopped. The manager was approaching now, probably to ask us to leave. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced, my voice carrying to every corner of the dining room, "I'd like you all to meet my wife, Marta, and her boyfriend, Ryan. They're celebrating 6 months of adultery tonight. The champagne is on them. They can afford it, since they've been using my money and his wife's money to fund their little affair." The silence was deafening. Then someone started clapping, slow, sarcastic applause that was quickly picked up by other diners. Within seconds, the entire restaurant was applauding, and not in a good way. Marta buried her face in her hands. Ryan looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Jennifer was smiling like she'd just won the lottery. "Check, please," I said to the hovering waiter. We left them there, sitting in their romantic corner table while an entire restaurant full of strangers judged them. It wasn't enough. Nothing would ever be enough to balance the scales, but it was a start. In the parking lot, Jennifer and I stood by our cars, breathing hard like we'd just run a marathon. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Empty," I said honestly. Angry, relieved, terrified, all of it at once. "Yeah, me too." She pulled out her phone and showed me a video. "I recorded the whole thing, in case we need it for the divorce proceedings." "Will you really report him to the licensing board?" "Already did, yesterday, along with copies of all the financial records I could find." Her smile was sharp. "Ryan's going to discover that screwing with a lawyer's wife is a very expensive mistake." We drove home separately, leaving Marta and Ryan to deal with the aftermath of their exposure. I didn't know what they would do. Try to salvage their weekend, pack up and leave, or just sit there and cry into their expensive wine. I didn't care. For the first time in months, I felt like I was in control of my own life. But the confrontation was just the beginning. The real work, the divorce, the property division, the complete dismantling of everything we'd built together, was still ahead of me. And I was going to make sure Marta regretted every lie she'd ever told me. Marta didn't come home Sunday night, or Monday night. I knew she was staying at her sister's house in St. Paul. Her car was in the driveway when I drove by Tuesday morning. Hiding, probably, trying to figure out how to spin the situation in her favor. She'd always been good at spin. It was her job, after all. But Tuesday afternoon, she finally came home. I was in the garage, organizing tools and pretending to be busy when I heard her car in the driveway. She came through the kitchen door like she was walking into a minefield, every step careful and calculated. "Owen?" Her voice was small, uncertain. "Are you here?" "In the garage." She appeared in the doorway, looking like she hadn't slept in days. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she was wearing sweatpants and an old college t-shirt, clothes she only wore when she was sick or depressed. "We need to talk," she said. "Do we? Please, can we sit down? Can we try to work this out like adults?" I set down the wrench I'd been holding and looked at her, really looked at her. When had the lines around her eyes gotten so deep? When had her mouth started turning down at the corners even when she wasn't frowning? When had she become a stranger wearing my wife's face? "Okay," I said. "Let's talk." We went into the living room and sat on opposite ends of the couch, the same couch where we'd watched movies and shared popcorn and planned our future together. Now it felt like a chasm between us. "I'm sorry," she said, and started crying again. "Owen, I'm so sorry. I never meant for it to happen. It just did." "Things don't just happen, Marta. People make choices. You made choices." "I know." "You're right. I made terrible choices, and I hurt you, and I'm sorry. But can't we try to fix this? Can't we go to counseling or take a break? Or something?" I studied her face, looking for any sign of the woman I'd fallen in love with 15 years ago. She was in there somewhere, buried under layers of guilt and desperation and self-justification. "Do you love him?" I asked. The question seemed to surprise her. "What?" "Ryan, do you love him?" She was quiet for a long moment, and in that silence I got my answer. "I don't know," she said finally. "I thought I did. I thought he understood me in a way that you didn't. But after what happened at the restaurant, after seeing how he just sat there while you and Jennifer... While we what? Told the truth? It wasn't supposed to be like that. It wasn't supposed to hurt anyone." I laughed, but it came out bitter and harsh. "How was it supposed to be, Marta? You were going to keep lying to me forever? Keep pretending to love me while you screwed around with someone else?" "I do love you," she said desperately. "That's what made it so hard. I love you, but I wasn't in love with you anymore, and Ryan made me feel alive again, young again, like I was worth something. And I didn't. You made me feel safe, comfortable, but not passionate, not like I was special." The words hit like physical blows, each one carefully aimed at my deepest insecurities. The boring husband, the maintenance guy who wasn't exciting enough for his successful wife, the man who provided security but not passion. "So you decided to find passion somewhere else." "I didn't plan it. It just happened. One day we were talking at a networking event, and he was funny and charming, and he made me laugh. And then we started texting, just as friends. And then you started lying to me, and planning fake trips, and buying new lingerie, and rewriting our entire marriage to justify what you were doing." She flinched at each accusation, but she didn't deny any of them. "What do you want me to say, Owen? That I'm a terrible person? That I destroyed everything good in my life for a few months of feeling desired? Fine, I did. I'm terrible. But I'm here now, trying to fix it. You can't fix it. Why not? People recover from affairs all the time. We could, because I don't want to. The words came out calm and final. I don't want to fix it, Marta. I don't want to go to counseling and talk about our feelings and pretend that this was just a mistake we can overcome. I don't want to spend the next 10 years wondering if you're really working late or if you're with someone else. I don't want to be married to someone who thinks I'm boring and safe and not worth being faithful to. That's not what I meant. It's exactly what you meant. And you know what? You're right. I am boring. I fix broken things for a living. I bowl on Tuesday nights and watch baseball on weekends, and I've never made you feel like you were the most important person in the world. But I was faithful to you. I was honest with you. I built my entire life around the idea that we were partners, that we were in this together. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at our perfectly manicured lawn. You want to know what the worst part is? It's not the sex. It's not even the lying. It's that you made me complicit in my own humiliation. Every time I helped you pack for a fake girls' trip, every time I told you to have fun with friends who weren't there, every time I kissed you goodbye and told you I loved you, you made me part of your lie. When I turned back, she was sobbing. Not the careful, manipulative tears she'd used at the restaurant, but ugly, desperate crying that shook her whole body. Please, she whispered, please don't give up on us. I'll do anything. I'll quit my job. I'll move somewhere else. I'll never see him again. Just please don't leave me. I'm not leaving you, Marta. You already left. You left months ago when you decided that what we had wasn't enough. You left when you chose him over me. You left when you turned our marriage into a lie. I walked to the front door and opened it. I want you out of the house by Friday. Take whatever you want. Clothes, personal stuff, whatever. We'll figure out the rest through lawyers. Owen? Friday, Marta. Don't make this harder than it has to be. She left that night, and I didn't see her again for 2 weeks. Her sister came by to pick up clothes and toiletries, shooting me dirty looks like I was the villain in this story. Marta's mother called to lecture me about the sanctity of marriage and the importance of forgiveness. A few of her work friends sent emails suggesting I was being unreasonable, that everyone made mistakes, that I should fight for my marriage. But I was done fighting. I was done being the understanding husband who made excuses for his wife's behavior. I was done being safe and boring and grateful for whatever scraps of affection she threw my way. Instead, I hired a lawyer. A good one, recommended by Jennifer Foster, who was in the process of systematically destroying Ryan's life with surgical precision. She'd frozen their joint accounts, filed restraining orders, and reported him to every professional organization he belonged to. Ryan's real estate license was under review, his business was hemorrhaging clients, and his reputation in the Minneapolis real estate community was radioactive. My lawyer, a sharp woman named Carol Peterson, reviewed my case with the efficiency of a medical examiner. Minnesota is a no-fault divorce state, she explained, but adultery can still impact property division and spousal support, especially when there's evidence of deception and financial misconduct. Financial misconduct? Your wife used marital funds to finance her affair. Hotel rooms, restaurants, gifts, travel expenses. We can document all of it and argue that she should compensate you for those expenditures. It turned out Marta had been more careless with money than I'd realized. Credit card statements showed hundreds of charges at restaurants I'd never been to, hotels I'd never stayed at, stores where she'd bought clothes and jewelry she'd never worn around me. She'd been living a double life, and she'd been using our money to pay for it. The house was the biggest issue. We'd bought it together, renovated it together, built equity together. But I had a secret weapon. For the past 3 years, I'd been the one making the mortgage payments. Marta's income had been going into her personal account, ostensibly for investment purposes. She'd been planning her exit strategy longer than either of us had realized. Carol smiled when I showed her the bank records. This is going to be easier than I thought. The divorce papers were served at Marta's office on a Wednesday afternoon. I wasn't there to see it, but her assistant Sarah called me later, sounding shaken. Owen, I just wanted you to know, Marta locked herself in her office after the process server left. She's been crying for 2 hours. I think she really thought you'd change your mind. Is she okay? I don't know. She keeps saying it's not supposed to be like this, that you're supposed to fight for her. I think she expected you to, I don't know, chase after her or something. That was exactly what she'd expected. Marta had always been the center of attention, the one everyone wanted to please and impress. She'd probably thought I'd beg her to come back, that I'd compete with Ryan for her affections, that I'd prove my love by groveling and promising to change. Instead, I'd done the one thing she never expected. I'd let her go. The final confrontation came 3 weeks later, at the mediation session Carol had arranged. Marta showed up with her own lawyer, a slick guy in an expensive suit who clearly thought he could intimidate me into a bad settlement. He was wrong. "My client is willing to be reasonable," he began, sliding a folder across the conference table. "She's prepared to accept a 50-50 split of all marital assets, with the understanding that both parties bear some responsibility for the breakdown of the marriage." Carol didn't even open the folder. "Your client committed adultery using marital funds and lied about it for 6 months. She's lucky we're not seeking criminal charges for financial fraud." "That's ridiculous." "Is it?" Carol opened her own folder and spread out bank statements, credit card bills, and hotel receipts. $17,000 in charges directly related to the affair, hotel rooms, dinners, gifts, travel expenses, all paid for with joint credit cards and money from joint accounts. Marta's lawyer looked at the evidence, and his confidence visibly deflated. "We'll need time to review." "No," I said, speaking for the first time since we'd sat down. "We're done reviewing. Here's what's going to happen." I slid my own folder across the table. Marta gets her personal belongings, her car, and half the value of her retirement accounts. I keep the house, the furniture, and everything else. She pays me back the $17,000 plus interest, and she signs a non-disclosure agreement promising never to discuss our marriage publicly. "That's completely unreasonable," Marta's lawyer started. "It's generous," Carol interrupted, "considering we have grounds to seek full restitution and punitive damages." Marta had been silent through the entire exchange, but now she looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. "Owen, please. This isn't you. You're not cruel like this." "You're right," I said. "The old me wasn't cruel. The old me was understanding and forgiving and willing to make excuses for people who didn't deserve them. But that guy is gone, Marta. You killed him when you decided our marriage wasn't worth your honesty." "I made a mistake. You made a choice. Every day for 6 months, you chose to lie to me. You chose to betray me. You chose to make me look like a fool while you played house with someone else. Those weren't mistakes, they were decisions." I stood up and gathered my papers. "Sign the agreement or don't sign it. I don't care anymore. But this is the only offer you're getting." She signed it. 2 months later, the divorce was final. Marta moved to Chicago for a new job, a fresh start away from the wreckage of her reputation in Minneapolis. Ryan's real estate business collapsed, and he ended up selling insurance in Duluth. Jennifer got everything in their divorce and used the money to start her own law practice. And me? I kept the house, got a promotion at work, and started dating a nurse named Katie who thought maintenance supervisors were interesting rather than boring. Life, it turned out, was pretty good when you stopped accepting less than you deserved. On the day the divorce papers were finalized, I found myself standing in the kitchen where this had all started, looking at the spot where Marta used to pack her suitcases for fake girls' trips. The house felt different now, not empty, but clean, like a wound that had finally healed. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "I heard about the divorce. I'm sorry it didn't work out. If you ever want to talk, Marta." I stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. There was nothing left to talk about, nothing left to forgive or forget or work through. There was only the future, stretching ahead like an open road. I poured myself a beer, sat down in my favorite chair, and turned on the baseball game. For the first time in months, I felt completely, perfectly at peace. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I was replacing a broken air conditioning unit in the pediatric ward when I met Katie Sullivan. She was a nurse in the NICU working the night shift, and she'd called maintenance because the temperature in the premature baby unit was fluctuating dangerously. "Thank God you're here," she said when I arrived with my tools. "We've got 3 babies in here who can't regulate their own body temperature, and the AC has been cycling on and off all night." She was pretty in an understated way. Auburn hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, green eyes that looked tired but alert, scrubs that had seen better days. She looked like someone who cared more about doing her job well than looking perfect while she did it. "Let me take a look," I said, opening up the control panel. "How long has this been going on?" "About 4 hours. The day shift supervisor said it wasn't urgent enough for an emergency call." Her voice carried a note of frustration that I recognized, the feeling of being ignored by people who didn't understand how important your work was. The problem was simple enough, a faulty sensor that was giving false readings to the temperature control system. 20 minutes with a screwdriver and a replacement part, and the unit was humming smoothly again. "You're a lifesaver," Katie said, checking the temperature display. "Literally. These little ones can't afford to have their environment unstable." "Just doing my job?" "No, you're doing it well. There's a difference." Something in the way she said it made me look at her more carefully. "Bad experience with maintenance?" She laughed, but it wasn't entirely happy. Bad experience with people who do the minimum and act like they're doing you a favor. You actually seem to care about getting it right. These are babies. Of course I care about getting it right. You'd be surprised how many people don't see it that way. We talked for a few more minutes while I cleaned up my tools. She was smart, funny, and completely unpretentious. When she mentioned that her shift was ending and asked if I wanted to grab coffee, I said yes without hesitation. The coffee shop near the hospital was mostly empty at 7 in the morning, just a few early commuters and hospital workers transitioning between shifts. Katie ordered black coffee and a plain bagel, practical choices that somehow seemed exactly right for her. "So," she said, settling into a booth by the window, "maintenance supervisor. How long have you been fixing things for a living?" 15 years at the hospital, longer than that overall. Started right out of high school. I stirred sugar into my coffee, suddenly self-conscious about my blue-collar background. "What about you? How long have you been saving babies?" 8 years in NICU, 12 years nursing overall. I started in general pediatrics, but the preemies kind of stole my heart. She smiled, and it transformed her whole face. There's something about helping these tiny fighters get strong enough to go home to their families. It's the best job in the world, even when it's the hardest. We talked for an hour about work, about the hospital, about the satisfaction of doing something that mattered. She didn't ask about my personal life, and I didn't volunteer anything about the divorce. It was refreshing to have a conversation that wasn't defined by my recent failures. "I should let you get some sleep," I said finally, noticing the fatigue creeping into her eyes. "Yeah, 12-hour shifts are brutal, but this was nice. Really nice." She hesitated for a moment, then pulled out her phone. "Would you like to do this again sometime? Maybe when we're both more awake?" I gave her my number, and she texted me immediately so I'd have hers. As I drove home, I realized I was smiling for the first time in months. Not the bitter satisfaction of revenge or the relief of ending something toxic, but genuine happiness at the possibility of beginning something good. Katie and I started having coffee regularly after her night shifts. Sometimes we'd grab breakfast at a diner near the hospital. Sometimes we'd just sit in her car in the parking lot and talk while she unwound from work. She was easy to be around. No drama, no hidden agendas, no complicated emotional games. She said what she meant and meant what she said. It took 3 weeks for her to ask about my marriage. "I noticed you don't wear a wedding ring," she said one morning as we shared pancakes at a 24-hour restaurant. "Divorced?" "Recently, about 6 months ago." "Bad divorce? Is there any other kind?" She laughed. "Fair point. Want to talk about it?" I found myself telling her the whole story. The fake girls' trips, the affair, the confrontation at the restaurant, the divorce proceedings. She listened without judgment, occasionally asking clarifying questions, but mostly just letting me talk. "That must have been devastating," she said when I finished. "It was, but also liberating in a weird way. Like I'd been living someone else's life for years, and suddenly I could be myself again." "What's your self like?" The question caught me off guard. I'm not sure I remember. I spent so many years trying to be the husband Marta wanted that I lost track of who I was before that. "Well," Katie said, reaching across the table to touch my hand briefly, "I like who you are now. You're kind, you're funny, you're good at your job, and you don't seem to have any interest in playing games or pretending to be something you're not. That's pretty attractive." We started dating officially a month later. Katie was nothing like Marta. Where Marta had been polished and ambitious and always performing, Katie was genuine and grounded and completely comfortable in her own skin. She lived in a small apartment near the hospital, drove a 10-year-old Honda Civic, and spent her free time reading mystery novels and volunteering at an animal shelter. "I'm not very exciting," she warned me on our third official date. "I don't like fancy restaurants or expensive wine or weekend trips to exotic places. I'm pretty boring, actually." "Boring sounds perfect," I said, and meant it. Our relationship developed slowly, naturally, without the intensity and drama that had characterized my marriage. We went to movies, cooked dinner together, watched baseball games on my couch. Katie learned to appreciate the technical skill involved in hospital maintenance, and I learned about the incredible complexity of keeping premature babies alive and healthy. "You know what I love about your job?" she said one evening as we sat on my back deck, sharing a beer and watching the sunset. "You fix things. When something's broken, you make it work again. There's something really satisfying about that. Your job's more important. You save lives." We both save lives, just in different ways. Those babies need a stable environment to survive, and you're the one who provides that. We're a team, even when we don't realize it. It was the first time anyone had ever described my work as life-saving. Marta had always seen it as blue-collar drudgery, something I did because I wasn't smart enough or ambitious enough to do something better. Katie saw it as skilled, necessary, valuable work that made a real difference in people's lives. 6 months into our relationship, she met my kids. Ross was home from college for Christmas break, and Amelia was finishing her senior year at the University of Minnesota. They'd both been supportive during the divorce, understanding that their mother had made choices that destroyed the family. But they were protective of me, suspicious of anyone new who might hurt me again. Katie won them over in about 30 minutes. "Dad's told us a lot about you," Amelia said over dinner at a restaurant near campus. "All good things, I hope," Katie replied with a smile. "He says you're the first person who's ever appreciated his work," Ross said. "That's pretty cool." "Your dad is really good at what he does. I see it every day at the hospital. He doesn't just fix problems, he prevents them. He thinks ahead, plans for contingencies, makes sure everything works the way it's supposed to. That takes real skill." I watched my kids' faces light up as Katie talked about my work with genuine respect and admiration. It occurred to me that they'd never heard anyone talk about me that way before. Marta had always been subtly dismissive of my job, treating it as something to be tolerated rather than celebrated. "Plus," Katie added with a grin, "he makes excellent coffee and he's surprisingly good at crossword puzzles." "Dad does crosswords," Amelia looked surprised. "Every morning. He's got this whole system, starts with the easy clues to build confidence, then tackles the hard ones. Very methodical." "I didn't know you did crosswords," Ross said to me. "There's a lot you don't know about me," I said. "I'm still figuring some of it out myself." After dinner, Amelia pulled me aside while Katie and Ross were looking at something on his phone. "I like her, Dad. She's real, and she makes you happy. I can see it in your face." "She does make me happy." "Good. You deserve that. You deserve someone who sees how great you are." A year after we started dating, Katie and I moved in together. Not to my house, too many memories there, but to a new place we picked out together. A smaller house in a different neighborhood, with a yard big enough for the dog we were planning to adopt, and a kitchen where we could cook together without bumping into ghosts of my former life. "Are you sure about this?" I asked her the night before we signed the lease. "Moving in with a divorced guy with baggage and 2 college-age kids?" "Owen," she said, taking my hands in hers, "your baggage is that you trusted someone who didn't deserve it and got hurt. That's not baggage. That's evidence that you're a good person who believes in love and commitment. The fact that someone else couldn't appreciate that is their loss, not your flaw." We signed the lease the next day. The house felt different from the beginning, not like a place where I was trying to recreate something that had been lost, but like a place where we were building something entirely new. Katie hung pictures of her family next to pictures of mine. We bought furniture together, chose paint colors together, planned the layout of rooms together. Every decision was a collaboration, a small act of trust and compromise and shared vision. "This feels right," Katie said one evening as we sat in our living room, surrounded by moving boxes and half-assembled furniture. "Like we're building something that belongs to both of us. It does feel right. No regrets about the divorce, about starting over, about any of it." I thought about it seriously. No regrets. The divorce was painful, but it freed me from something that was never going to work. And if I hadn't gone through all that, I never would have been ready for this. For what? For you. For us. For the possibility that love doesn't have to be complicated and dramatic and exhausting. That it can be simple and honest and peaceful. Katie smiled and curled up next to me on our new couch. Peaceful sounds perfect. 2 years later, I proposed to her in the hospital parking lot after her shift ended. It wasn't romantic in any conventional sense. We were both tired, she was still in her scrubs, and it was snowing, but it felt right. "I don't have a ring yet," I said as she got into my truck. "And this isn't how I plan to do this. But I love you, Katie Sullivan, and I want to spend the rest of my life fixing things and saving lives and being boring together. Will you marry me?" She said yes before I finished the question. We had a small wedding 6 months later. Just family and close friends, no drama or complications or elaborate planning. Katie wore a simple white dress, I wore my best suit, and we exchanged vows we'd written ourselves in the backyard of our little house. "I promise to love you for who you are, not who I think you should be," I said, looking into her green eyes. "I promise to trust you completely and never make you prove your love. I promise to appreciate the ordinary moments and never take our happiness for granted." "I promise to see you clearly and love what I see," she replied. "I promise to build a life with you based on honesty and respect and genuine partnership. I promise to never make you feel like you're not enough, because you are everything I need. Mike was my best man, and he gave a toast that made everyone laugh and cry at the same time. Owen's been my best friend for 25 years, he said, raising his beer. I've seen him through good times and times that were so bad they were almost good again, but I've never seen him as happy as he is right now, with Katie. She sees what the rest of us have always known, that Owen is one of the good guys, the kind of man you can count on to show up and do the work and love you the way you deserve to be loved. Here's to Owen and Katie, and to the kind of love that makes everything else make sense. As I looked around at our small gathering, my kids, Katie's family, our friends from the hospital, the people who mattered most in our lives, I felt a deep sense of contentment that I'd never experienced before. This wasn't the passionate, dramatic love that movies and songs celebrated. This was something better. Steady, reliable, honest love that would last. That night, as Katie and I sat on our back porch in our wedding clothes, sharing a beer and watching the stars, I thought about the journey that had brought us here. The betrayal and pain of my first marriage had been devastating, but it had also been necessary. I'd needed to learn what love wasn't before I could recognize what love was. Any regrets? Katie asked, echoing the question she'd asked on our first night in the house. Just one, I said. What's that? I regret that it took me so long to find you. She smiled and took my hand. We found each other exactly when we were supposed to. Not a moment sooner, not a moment later. Perfect timing. She was right. Everything had happened exactly as it was meant to happen. The fake girls' trips, the affair, the confrontation, the divorce, all of it had been necessary to bring me to this moment, to this woman, to this life that felt finally completely mine. I squeezed Katie's hand and smiled back at her. Perfect timing, I agreed. And for the first time in my life, I truly understood what happiness felt like.